Okay, it looks like folks are still trickling in, but we're going to get started because we have a lot of information to share. I just want to welcome everyone. I want to start by saying closed captioning is available. Please use the feature within Zoom for best results on closed captioning. Um, for those that I don't know, I know there's a lot of folks with us this morning. My name is Adam Pearl. I'm President and CEO of Art Pride New Jersey. I am a white male in my mid 40s with short brown hair and hazel eyes. I'm wearing a checkered kind of off-white shirt today. I have a gray wall behind me in my home office where I'm coming to you from. So glad you could be with us today to hear about the initial findings from the ArtsPay NJ 2025 or ArtsPay NJ 2 survey. We wanted to say right off the bat that we are recording this webinar. We will be sharing out the recording of this webinar as well as the slides that are today. So take a deep breath, sit back. You don't have to scramble to capture all of this in your notes. We really want you to enjoy and hear all of what we've learned. We do want to encourage folks to ask questions. Please, if possible, use the Q&A feature within Zoom. There is both the chat and the Q&A. Questions are really helpful to come in through Q&A. They're just more easily tracked there. We don't want to miss something in the chat. But I do encourage you to use the chat to keep an eye on it. We might be dropping, some links in there or sharing some information. And I know folks are already saying good morning to each other there. So that takes care of my housekeeping for right now. It gives me great pleasure to bring on my friend and colleague, fellow co-leader amongst the art service organizations in this project, the executive director of the New Jersey Theater Alliance, John McEwen.
Thank you so much, Adam. Good morning, everybody. Great to be with you all. Just to give a visual description of myself, I am a white male in my early 60s with brown and gray hair parted on the side, a mustache and goatee, glasses with clear eye frames and bright blue leg frames. And I'm wearing a kind of an orange checkered shirt today that is buttoned down, and I have a blurred background. And coming to you today from Asbury Park, land of the Lenape, and really delighted to be with you all today and excited to hear about the results of ArtsPay 2025. As you know, many of you completed our first ever arts compensation survey back in 2023, and delighted that 2 years later we offered another survey. We want to thank all organizations and arts workers that took the time to complete this survey, and really looking forward to hearing about the comparative data that we're going to be hearing this morning and how best all of you can utilize this data as you continue to assess and strengthen your compensation and employee policies and practices. I would like to also take this time to just give a shout out to the incredible art service organization community. I want to share, if we could advance the slide, please. I'd like to thank our colleagues at Arts Ed New Jersey, Adam at Art Pride, Dance New Jersey, the New Jersey Association of Museums, the South Jersey Cultural Alliance. Thank you all for all of your great work and partnership in this journey as to get us here today. And especially, I want to thank the New Jersey State Council on the Arts for their continued support and commitment and belief in the power of this work. And it's my pleasure to say a hello to Diane Felson, who has some words from the Arts Council. Good morning, Diane.
Good morning, and thank you so much, John. It's really always a wonderful day when we get to have a results webinar for this project, and I'm so excited to be here. A quick visual description about me is I am a white cisgender woman, straight brown hair. Today, my background is blurred. I'm wearing a black knit cardigan. I have a black set of headphones on my head, and I'm wearing wire-framed glasses. Um, The Arts Council, the New Jersey State Council on the Arts, is so proud to be an ongoing supporter of the ArtsPay New Jersey project. And this long-term project has been such a wonderful way for New Jersey's service organizations and the Arts Council to work together as a collective to address and prioritize transparency and pay equity in the arts in New Jersey. The Council on New Jersey service organizations recognize that the health, stability, and mission-driven success of the nonprofit arts organizations in our state are directly related to the mission-driven specialized arts workforce employed by these organizations. And I really want to thank all of you here for your interest in the release of today's data, and also to everyone who took the time to share their specific data with the project team. This participation was essential to telling a complete story about New Jersey's nonprofit arts workers, what's working, and what can be improved. I also want to thank all of the service organizations once more. We've worked diligently on this project. It's been a years-long collaboration, and I'm so glad we're still doing this together. Our Pride New Jersey, Arts Ed New Jersey, Dance New Jersey, the New Jersey Theater Alliance, the New Jersey Association of Museums, and South Jersey Cultural Alliance. And I especially want to recognize the efforts of John McEwen and Erica Nagel at the New Jersey Theater Alliance, who have done so much extra heavy lifting to keep the momentum going, to keep the project moving forward, to keep the collective working as a collective, and to ensure that all the communities that we are tasked to support are represented in today's report. So thank you, John and Erica, especially for all your hard work, and thanks to everyone here today.
Thank you, Diane, so much. And it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Erica Nagel. Thank you, Erica. I just want to echo Diane's sentiment. Thank you so much for your incredible leadership and support of this project. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. My name is Erica Nagel. I'm the Deputy Director at the New Jersey Theater Alliance. I use she, her pronouns. And just a quick visual description, I'm a white woman in my mid-40s. I've got mid-length brown, sort of wavy curly hair, blue background, and I'm wearing a sort of dusty green jacket today. This morning, I'm here to share a brief land acknowledgement. So this land acknowledgement, the language that we're using was created with consultation and guidance from Reverend Dr. John Norwood of the Nanticoke Lenape tribe. And we are extremely grateful to him for his generosity, wisdom, and labor to help craft these words. We gather today from many locations, but for those of us physically in New Jersey, we acknowledge that we are in the traditional territory of the Lenni Lenape, the indigenous people of this land. We honor the Lenape tribal communities that still remain in their homeland and those of the diaspora that were forced to migrate away. We respectfully acknowledge that from ancient times, the Lenape have lived in relationship with these lands and waters, and we pause to show our respect for their ancestors who lived here before, the Lenape people today, and their generations to come. And I also just want to acknowledge that ArtsPay NJ is part of a larger sector-wide project to really make the arts community more equitable, just, anti-racist, accessible. And so I will drop into the chat 2 upcoming opportunities from the Creating Change Network, which directly intersect with the findings from ArtsPay. One, they're both led by the same incredible facilitator, so it's a 2-part series, one about creating intentional culture, and one specifically about policies and written practices. So I'll pop those in the chat and hope that you will join us. And now it's my great pleasure to turn things over to David Reese, who has been our incredible consultant from Baker Richards, who will share the main takeaways from the findings. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Erica. Great to be here. Hello, everyone. I'm David Rees. I am coming to you from Cambridge in the UK. I am a white man in my early 40s. I have short blonde hair. I have tortoise shell glasses on, a blonde stubby beard. I'm wearing a light green crew neck jumper, and behind me are some white cupboards. So it is my pleasure to share with you the results today from the kind of the work that we've been doing to understand compensation within the sector. Just a little bit kind of an overview to start with. So for those of you who are kind of less familiar, what is ArtsPay New Jersey? It really is the only comprehensive compensation and workforce study specific to kind of New Jersey's arts and cultural sector. We're covering salary, benefits, hours, perceptions of pay, career trajectory, and working conditions. So it was a comprehensive study that we undertook. 534 of you responded to the individual survey. We also had 123 organizations respond to the organizational survey, which gave us a total of just over 6,500 personnel covered in that. So we have a really comprehensive, robust data set in order to be able to kind of really look at the details here. Um, a few things that were new in 2025. So for those of you who are familiar with the 23 one, this was an expansion on that survey. So we deliberately expanded its reach. So this time we had specific sections which covered teaching artists. Freelance contract workers were included as well for the first time. We developed the internship questions that we asked last time to allow that more space there. So really we can start to see more of how that kind of workforce kind of fits together. It were previously invisible in the data. So just before we get into the kind of like headline findings and discuss those in more detail, just a little bit about Baker Richards in that where we fit into all of this. So Baker Richards is a kind of research and consulting agency. We're based in the UK, as I said, but we work globally. We do a lot of work with data and on surveying of this type. We also run the ArtsPay UK, which has been going for nearly 10 years now in the UK and released a kind of a round just recently actually. So we're very familiar with the kind of the compensation salary study. So we collected, we anonymized, we analyzed all of the data as a kind of third party. It's also worth saying that when you are kind of looking through the report when that's released, we've made kind of efforts to kind of make sure that when you're looking at the data, you can see how many people are included in any kind of chart that you're looking at. So for some kind of sample sizes, it gets a little bit small. And therefore we just need to be mindful about reading too much into those small kind of numbers. The webinar itself that we'll go through now and the kind of the data that I'll be presenting, largely it's coming from the individual survey responses. So that's the 534 people telling us what they kind of earn and their experience. There's also an associated dashboard, again, which some of you may remember from last time, which was based on the organizational data. That draws on a kind of obviously a related, but it is a separate data set. So they were job records submitted directly by organizations. That covers about 929 positions across 68 organizations and just over 6,500 personnel. So there's a much kind of larger data set which has some of the detail in that we don't necessarily have in the individual one, but within the individual one, we have much more kind of texture and color about how people perceive pay and their experience of working in the arts. The confidence really in the kind of the results here and what we're looking at today comes from the fact that there's a lot of consistency between what we found in 23 and what we found in 25. So whilst the kind of overall kind of patterns are the same, we are able to then pull out where there have been changes, sometimes for the positive, sometimes not so positive. And that's what we want to share with you today. So this report, it's kind of peppered with some key quotes that we've just pulled in from kind of people directly, just to hear from what people within the sector have been saying. And I think it almost kind of sets the tone for some of the things that we'll go on to like look at and discover as part of this webinar. But just to read this one here, I'm in my 30s and I feel I can't build a financial future for myself that includes family planning or long-term stability. It's frustrating and depressing and affects how long I can feel I can continue to work in the arts. Now, that's from someone who's a woman in their kind of 30s as a full-time employee. And it reflects a lot of, I think, the frustrations that came through in the surveying. And we'll kind of get into a lot more of that as we go through. So I also wanted to just start with a kind of a very top level zoomed out look of actually, this is a sector that adds $29.2 billion to the economy each year. So this is from 23. It grows at twice the rate of the broader economy. So in anything, this is a really value driving engine of the economy. Each arts worker here contributes roughly nearly $200,000 in economic value, but they do that on a median salary of about $70,000. So that kind of that ratio of what's the value that you derive versus the pay that you receive is almost the frame for everything that we then kind of get into. So, what did we learn from the data? What are the kind of six big points that the stories kind of emerge from the findings this year? So, we're kind of following a very deliberate arc here in terms of the kind of six stories that we're pulling out. So, starting a little bit with the kind of headline macro picture of what does pay look like overall, and then moving into some more of those kinds of structural issues around hours and benefits and transparency. Um, we look at the gains that are then kind of and how they're distributed, often unequally by race, gender, and age. And then we end with some of those workers that we didn't touch on last time. So the freelancers, the teaching artists who are outside of our kind of scope last time. And some of it will kind of confirm what you already know, I'm sure, and some of it will potentially complicate it, and potentially even a few things might surprise you as we go. So we're going to take these in turn. So the first story that we're going to dig into in a little bit more detail is the fact that actually pay has risen. But what's really coming through strongly is that it doesn't feel as though it's risen. So the experience of being paid kind of lags the fact that actually on paper it has gone up. So before we go into the stories in individual detail, this is helpful just to kind of give you some very quick fire stats as to kind of what's changed and what hasn't over the course of the last 2 years. So this is the slide of positive news. This is the what's improved between 23 and 25. And actually, there's a long list of things that have improved. So on paper, again, full-time median salary, it's gone up since we last kind of recorded it in 23 when it was $64,000. It's gone up to 71 $750. So we've got the little kind of indication of nominal increase, so just the pure percentage difference, and then the real increase is the inflation adjusted increase, so what you kind of get after you take out the impact of inflation. So a 6% real terms increase is an above inflationary increase. So there's a positive story in that headline stat. It does differ. So when you start breaking the salary down, and we'll do this as we get into more of the data, entry level, it hasn't gone up by quite as high a percentage. So that's moved by 9% nominal, 3% real, but it's still moved in the right direction. The senior median salary has also moved to some extent. It's moved faster than the other two as well. So the senior kind of median moving from 76,300 to 87,800-ish, which is a 9% real terms increase. So some bigger gains there. Some kind of then broad gains across the benefits that people are in receipt of. So things like employee health insurance has gone up by 6 points, retirement plan by 11, paid parental leave, that's quite a big increase there to 12%. Bereavement leave, also a significant increase from 50 to 63, and union membership has also increased as well from a 16% kind of recorded last time to 21 this time. So that's a slide of good news. They're the kind of positive gains that we've kind of recorded in the survey. This is perhaps the slide that is a little bit more of a bad news, but bear with us. We'll kind of dig into the detail and kind of pull out some of the things that have kind of caused this. So what's changed or worsened between 23 and 25? So the hourly median wage that we have recorded from the individual responses has remained at $25, which is effectively a real terms pay cut because it hasn't moved in line with inflation. Overtime ineligibility has dropped slightly, so from 88 to 82%. So more people are still ineligible, no, so fewer people are eligible for overtime. The hours worked gap, by which we mean how many people are working beyond the hours that they are contracted for, has remained the same at about 62%. So 2/3 of workers are working above and beyond their hours. The perception of pay, it has shifted down slightly, so it has moved from 69 to 62, but it's still high despite the fact that incomes have risen. But still, that's 2/3. Job seeking intent, so the proportion of workers who told us that they were actively looking for other kind of employment from their current position has stayed the same at about a third, so 36 to 37. The pay gaps between race, gender have both increased. So the race pay gap has moved from a 5K gap to a 9.27K gap, so nearly doubling. But the gender pay gap has moved from a 3K to a 9.5K, so that has more than tripled. in this period as well. So again, we're going to kind of dive into those in a bit more detail as we kind of go through this. So starting with the stories then, going back to kind of that original one, pay has risen, the experience hasn't. So if salaries did go up, why doesn't it feel that way? Um, so this is a breakdown of the median salary by level of experience. So entry levels, mid level, senior, and then the overall. So that you can see in the overall, in the lighter blue, you've got the 23 numbers. In the darker blue, you've got the 25 numbers. You can see in the overall, it was 64, now to 71. You can see how it's moved across those other kind of levels. And as I mentioned earlier, senior is the one that's seen the biggest bump at kind of 15% increase. So obviously they are kind of positive movements in that direction. But what happens is when you look at the perception side, actually, whilst it is down from 69 to 62, it's still not necessarily that increase in pay being translated into a perception of it still being fair. So the gains are real, they're just not necessarily being felt. And of course, when you look at hourly workers who sit outside of full-term employment, their median is flat at $25. So they're not necessarily seeing any of these gains at all. They're in fact falling further behind in real terms. And again, a quote just to kind of give some color to this. This is a woman in her 50s, a full-time employee, and she describes kind of why a salary increase didn't feel like one, because effectively the raise was absorbed by health insurance cost increases, leaving taking home pay effectively unchanged. And so if raises have been minimal, even if they haven't necessarily, I mean, it does vary. So it feels certainly like it has. It barely covers the increased costs that you're getting elsewhere. So if we jump into the kind of the second story now, which was really the kind of when we think about pay, we're obviously not just thinking about the salary, we're also thinking about the compensation package in its entirety. And that obviously all kind of contributes to how you kind of perceive what you're getting in return for your kind of work. So a few kind of headline stats here. We'll kind of take each of these in turn. So the kind of overtime eligibility, hours worked, and healthcare. So 82% of full-time workers have no overtime eligibility, which, as I mentioned earlier, is down slightly from 88, but it's not a huge kind of improvement here. So again, it's largely unchanged. The vast majority of full-time workers have no legal entitlement to extra pay, regardless of how many additional hours they work. And then that's 61%. So 61% routinely are exceeding their kind of contracted hours. And you can see in that chart below, about 19% are working 10 or more extra hours on top of their contracted hours, 43 up to 10, and then the remaining 39 split between mostly people working 34 and the 5% working fewer. Um, so moving on to the kind of the healthcare. So healthcare premium, many of the kind of respondents told us that actually know what their employer covers, which is consistent with what we found last time. So the response to actually what is the contribution for kind of from employers for healthcare has remained largely unchanged, even though a large kind of proportion of people told us that they have staff handbooks, which potentially suggests that there's a kind of communication or kind of misinformation gap there. And we'll return to some of that in the kind of fourth story that we'll talk about today. The other things there, retirement match has gone up, so up from 32 to 42, but it's still low on the overall kind of percentage of what people are getting as a benefit. And some of these things as well, dental insurance has moved slightly, but it's still overall only at 43%. Vision insurance has moved from 30 to 38. So these are all kind of moving in the right direction. They're just still kind of minority percentage of workers are receiving those particular benefits, and only 6% have any childcare support, which we can look at in a little bit more detail here. When we get to the bottom point on the number of people who actually have children. But if we look at in kind of a little bit more detail about actually the kind of perception of people who think that the salary falls below expectations at 62%, and also alongside that, 44% feel that benefits fall short. So slightly lower. So, more people are saying that benefits are actually okay. but there's still 44% who are saying that it's not. May not be the same people. So obviously there is some overlap between them. And of course, if you're both feeling that your salary is falling short and your benefits are falling short, then you're probably getting the worst of all things. But there will be some people who are seeing kind of okay benefits, but not great salary, and okay salary, but not great benefits. And then, of course, when you get to those that have kind of need for specific kind of benefits because of their circumstances. So 1 in 3 of the respondents to the survey told us that they had a child under 18, so some caring responsibility. The fact that only 6% have employee childcare support kind of shows you the potential, gap here and the kind of challenge it might be for those particular kind of workers in that circumstance. Um, If we look at some of the things then in comparison to how they've changed from 23 to 25, some of those that have jumped quite significantly are some of the smaller ones. And actually, the thing that's probably jumped the most are the two at the top here. So paid parental leave and bereavement. Now, paid parental leave is still really quite low, but the fact that it's moving from 25 to 37, I think it's also the largest single benefit gain in the survey, suggests that, again, there's a positive here. Um, But when you look and break that down by who is receiving that, you still get to see the discrepancy between those that are in full-time employment, who are more than 3 times as likely to have it, than those who are kind of part-time. Um, Bereavement's also one that's kind of jumped up as well from 50 to 63, so a 13-point increase, which is larger than the kind of the overall gains elsewhere. So again, you're definitely seeing lots of potential improvements, but not necessarily universal. And when you start to look at it and break it down by full-time and part-time, you get to Adam, you've just popped up, which presumably means there's a question, a burning question that we want to drill into.
Yes. Oh, excuse me. That's what happens when you don't speak for a little while. So someone had a question, just, if there was like generally what benefits we were considering, like in terms of childcare assistance, if there were examples.
So I don't know specific examples unless people actually wrote them in, and we can definitely go and have a look to see what that was. But it was a pretty standard question about childcare benefits. It wasn't kind of more detailed than that. So I think the core answer is probably it's open to interpretation as to what people would consider to be childcare benefits.
I think I appreciate that. I think that gives some clarification. And there was another question which I didn't want to interrupt because you were on a roll, and I thought maybe I could answer in the chat, but I didn't want to presume. When we talked about economic impact earlier, the $197,000 impact, that was annually or over a career?
That was annual, so that was basically taking the 2023 number of the billion-dollar number that I've now forgotten off the top of my head, and dividing it by the number of arts workers to work out what effectively the value added per worker was. So you could then compare it to salary and go, actually, yeah, everyone who's working in here on a median level is generating 3 times their value in what they're being paid. Now, they're not like for like measures, but it's just a nice indicator to be able to say how valuable the work is that's being done.
I think those are our questions for right now. There's a technical question in the chat, but we're going to handle that in the chat. So please go ahead, David.
Great. Okay. Uh, let's jump on to our next slide, which is another quote. And again, I think it speaks to some of the challenges that I think kind of workers and also employers are facing when it comes to being able to kind of offer and communicate benefits. So this is a woman in her 30s. She's a full-time employee. She's asking for that kind of dialogue between leaders and staff regarding compensation and benefits, because I guess that, especially in a changing financial world, and the cost of living is obviously kind of the backdrop to all of this. It's a kind of a tough environment out there. And making the point that actually some of those benefits might be more helpful than others, just so that it's not just seen as, okay, you get lots of benefits, but if lots of them are irrelevant to you, then great, it doesn't really apply. Um, so we've seen kind of then what the kind of the bundle of benefits contains and how we're seeing some positive movements in that. But if we actually look at what the sector is kind of asking for in return, we'll turn to our kind of third story, which is really the kind of the shift from here, kind of what workers receive to what they actually give, told through the lens of kind of overwork, which has effectively become a kind of an expectation within the sector. always acknowledged. And the data, again, looking back to what it was and what it is at the moment, it's fairly consistent, which suggests that this is a structural issue that just keeps on kind of maintaining itself. And interestingly, when people are talking about this, they're quite passionate about it. They definitely talk about it with kind of moral terms and the idea that it's a kind of it is an ethical point in itself. So it's not necessarily about kind of occasional long weeks. Actually, it's just about the way the sector works. And that's obviously what people are feeling as well when they're talking about not necessarily feeling that pay is compensating for the additional hours that they are putting in. So another kind of quick chart here. Um, The this is a kind of a breakdown of the kind of what I showed earlier, which was an overall where it said that kind of 62% were working or 61% were working above their kind of contracted hours. This breaks it down a little bit further into those that are entry level, mid-level, senior, and we do have exec in here with enough kind of responses in here to give us a little bit more kind of robust results on exec. But you can see that there is obviously a correlation here with those that people are working kind of at the executive level. Over half of them are putting in kind of more than 10 hours above and beyond their contract each week. So again, is it a factor of just senior arts leadership that is just self-perpetuating because there isn't necessarily a solution? Um, so that's obviously one thing to highlight. You can see that when you start entry level, actually over half of them, just over half of them, are working their contracted hours. So it seems to be that something that gets worse and potentially gets even worse when you end up being at that exact level. Um, the the kind of the moral language as well. I think the fact that people were still speaking about this in terms that it did feel demoralizing and unethical again speaks to the sensitivity about this and the fact that how do you raise this issue without being kind of told that, oh, it's just the expectation? And definitely a lot of the comments are reflecting that because obviously they were able to tell it in a way that meant that there was no judgment. It was just a kind of a reaction to how you felt. And it really wasn't just a kind of occasional venting. I mean, this is really kind of quite visceral with some of the things that were coming through in there. Um, if we go back to this one and look at the kind of question around work-life balance, I think you're also starting to see some of the kind of impacts of what happens when you're working and you're also working above and beyond what you're kind of contracted to do. So, I mean, start with the positive. At the bottom of this chart, 14% of respondents actually said that they have excellent work-life balance. So maybe we should go and talk to what those 14% are doing and ask them how they're achieving that, because great, they've got that kind of working for them. 38% are in good, so that's not too bad. 34% now start to fall into the fair. But then you've got 12% in poor and 2% in very poor. So if you look at it as kind of a whole, nearly half of them are really kind of saying that the balance is fair or worse. So it's clearly not necessarily just a kind of marginal problem. Um, and the fact that, it's repeatedly, this quote again encapsulates the kind of comments that are coming through. You work kind of 50, 70 hours on an event, multiple weeks in a row, and it wipes you out. So, of course, your kind of work-life balance, especially during those high intensity periods, disappears completely. And just a few other things to highlight here that aren't necessarily shown in the chart, but when you look at the underlying data, freelancers much more likely to report poor balance. And there is a gender divide here. So men are often more likely to report good or excellent balance, which again, this speaks to the kind of inequity that exists when you start to break this down and actually where some of that kind of pressure falls most with on certain people within the sector. Um, and again, I guess this is just to hammer home this point about what people told us. This is from a part-time employee. They didn't tell us their gender or their age, but the fact that the lack of pay and benefits and the way that it's been normalized, despite extremely high expectations on staff, is demoralizing. So it even feels unethical at times. The amount of work and skill required is not properly compensated. And I think, again, it speaks to, again, not just the point about it being unethical or demoralizing, but the fact that people who are working in the sector obviously see themselves as highly skilled. And therefore, that not being recognized in pay does feel like you're being kind of underappreciated. Adam, we have another question.
Yeah, yes. And David, this might be a stretch. It might be a bit more anecdotal than data, but I know that you also run Bigger Richards also runs ArtsPay UK. And
Mhm.
so Heather Yell from Apple Farm here in New Jersey asked, how does the issue of overwork in the arts as a norm in the US compare to the UK? Just wondering.
It's pretty similar actually. I think that when you look at the like for like kind of comparison, we did ask a very similar question about how many people work above and beyond their hours. Depending on the type of kind of employee you are, if you're working kind of on the production side, then the expectation is that people just get on with it and carry on working and give way beyond. There's a lot of hidden labor, both in kind of the UK as well as here.
And another question just popped up while I have you. Might as well ask. Melicone, hi Melanie, was asking, in terms of women feeling they don't have a good work-life balance over men, could that be tied to the amount of domestic labor women are expected to do?
Uh, I- that could well be it. I mean, again, you'd have to drill down into some of the more detailed kind of responses to kind of pull out some of those trends. I guess the other factors, and we'll get onto this, and I mentioned it earlier, is that there is a gender pay gap which has got wider. So another reason why women may feel that they are not receiving the pay is because they're genuinely not. So therefore, there is pay inequity that exists across that kind of gender divide.
Thank you. All right, back to you.
Great. All right, let's move on. We are now on to our kind of fourth story. So this one is again, it's sort of about benefits, and it's really about actually understanding what you're entitled to. So workers don't always know what they're kind of receiving, but actually neither do employees know what they're kind of able to give, and that's, I guess, just as important. Um, so it's not necessarily just about kind of like where's the information failure. It's just, I think about an understanding actually what is possible, how do you communicate that clearly, and almost a kind of like sectoral challenge as well to be able to kind of point to things. So I guess, in terms of clear opportunities for follow up and guidance, this will be something that will emerge from this, I'm sure. Um, but still, to say that actually some employees don't actually have very clearly documented benefit structures, I think that's true given the number of don't knows that we had in response to some of the things about benefits. And on top of that, if you couple it with the fact that it's not necessarily always clearly communicated, it does then cause a lot of misunderstanding about what people actually are entitled to. Um, so this is the kind of one that I guess highlights all of it in terms of actually the one question around what people kind of understand about their benefits or don't understand in this case. So this was a question which was about what percentage of people, or actually the question itself was what percentage of your healthcare premium came from your employer as a contribution. And this is showing the percentage of people who don't know. And I think what's striking is that 53% of entry-level employees don't know what their employee contributes to their health premium. It does reduce as you kind of get kind of more senior, so at exec level it drops to 7%. So there's an effect of both being able to kind of say, actually just been around a long time, and I guess to some extent at exec level you're in the room where the decisions are made. Um, so there's a little bit of a kind of misunderstanding there. And the thing, again, this is interesting in that what came out as a top priority is definitely kind of more pay, but also more transparent pay practices. So this is a kind of a new thing that emerged in 25. It's not just that actually they want pay, but it's also that actually being able to see how much other people are being paid, which to some extent the dashboard that we've created will allow you to go and do, and we'll go and have a look at that in a moment. Um, Obviously, within again the mix of people who responded to the survey, freelancers are kind of getting the hardest hit because they don't necessarily have any of these benefits. They're lacking kind of written contracts. They don't necessarily have clear rate structures. They don't necessarily get a loss of notice. And they may actually be eligible for a lot of benefits because they're technically employers, but they're not necessarily getting them in receipt of them. Um, so where people are kind of more positive about all of this definitely falls on the transparency. So being able to kind of really understand like pay progression, so clear bands, being able to understand defined hours, what that kind of benefit structure looks like, almost becomes like actually this is an example of good practice. And again, because there was like I honestly the number of kind of really articulate kind of responses and kind of in-depth detail that people provided as the kind of like the free text responses to the survey. It's just, almost everybody had something really kind of like important to say. So I mean, just thank you for kind of contributing um, so seriously to it. It's been really good to be able to kind of give more of a kind of narrative kind of texture to the story. So this is from an 18 to 29-year-old woman full time, and she's describing this gap. And I think again, it speaks to where do you want to go as a sector? Her quote being, "I hope in the future compensation is built into an employee's overall growth plan with an organization. Oftentimes it falls on the employee to ask for more after they've been with an organization longer and or taken on more work. So I think it's like, where does the kind of the agency lie? And there's a challenge there for organizations to respond before it's kind of asked, which obviously would benefit the employer and the employee. So, moving on to our kind of fifth story here, as we kind of rapidly get through this, sustainability is not evenly distributed. And I think that we've already kind of highlighted some of those areas earlier in terms of the gaps in salary and where people are seeing gains and where some people necessarily aren't seeing gains. Um, and the kind of the dimensions of that inequality are kind of clearest where you can see it across race, you can see it across gender, you can see it across age as well. And I guess to some extent, the fact that they have widened suggests that in some ways there's forwards movement, but in other ways it's not necessarily being felt by everyone. And I guess, this is the point of doing the survey, is to look to see how you address some of these things. So let's start with the kind of the pay gap. So this chart here kind of showing you broken down the median salaries, full-time median salaries, the lighter purple being from 23, the darker purple being from 25. So you can compare for white respondents, people of color, men and women. And then you can start to see how they've shifted over time. You can see that kind of who's seen the biggest gain. Well, men have seen the biggest gain from 67 to 80,000 median salary. Also, white respondents from 65 to 74 almost. Which, as a result of that, because people of color and women haven't kept pace with that increase that white and men have seen, the gap has widened. So the race pay gap, as I said, has nearly doubled from $5,000 to 9,270, which in percentage terms is an 85% increase. So that's a significant increase. The gender pay gap, though, has more than tripled. So that's gone from 3,000, so it was relatively similar in 23, to now being 9,500. So obviously they're both going in the wrong direction. When you start to look at as well the kind of some of those other questions and how they kind of relate to this, people of color 15% more likely to feel that their salary falls below expectations than white respondents. So that's 73 versus 58. And people of color also more represented at mid-level, which is interesting because it suggests that there's a kind of potentially a kind of pipeline issue in terms of how do you kind of broaden and reach higher levels if you don't fill certain kind of characteristics. On gender, women again definitely underrepresented at the higher level. So at exec level, 8% executives versus women versus 23% of men. Women also 17 points more likely to feel kind of underpaid. And it's other point as well, which we don't have the data in detail to break down neurodiversity further than this, but the fact that we've seen kind of growth in the number of respondents who have indicated kind of neurodiversity characteristic, I guess to some extent that's a reflection of both greater kind of self-identification and the fact that the survey design made it okay to be able to kind of check that box. But the thing that comes through when you start to look at some of the kind of responses that people who had indicated that was around flexibility and hybrid working, as effectively that's what makes it sustainable as a career. The other thing that is, I guess, striking as a what's changed number from 23 to 25 is this chart here. So this chart is showing you the percentage of people who are looking for different employment. So again, you've got light purple showing you the numbers from 23 and the dark purple, the numbers from 25. It's broken down by age, so the youngest respondents 18 to 29 through to those in 50 to 59. The numbers above that get a little low, so we've kind of kept them off this chart for now, although there is still a fairly high percentage of people in that kind of small number of 60 pluses who are also still looking for other work. But the thing that obviously you can all see quite strikingly from this is the fact that the 18 to 29-year-old kind of on the left here has moved from 20% actively looking for different employment to 40%. So it has doubled in 2 years. Most of the other ones have actually stayed flat or actually declined. So it does suggest that at that kind of entry level, the youngest people in the sector are much more likely to be kind of on the lookout more than they were in 23, which, to some extent, that's a kind of inevitability. But the fact that it shifted so much, I think, is the striking thing. And on the positive side, of those people who are actively kind of job seeking in that age bracket, about 2/3 of them still want to stay within the art sector. But I suppose, that's still a third of them. So what that's roughly kind of like 12, 13 or so percentage who are looking to leave the sector entirely, which I guess is a challenge for the kind of the pipeline going forwards as to how you maintain a sector if actually even at entry level there's just a lot of people just looking for better kind of pay, better conditions, better kind of work-life balance. And just to highlight that again, from a kind of spoken from an employee in that age bracket, 18 to 29-year-old woman full-time employee. Pay for entry-level exhibitions, museums, art gallery staff is typically abysmal. While my salary doesn't pay me enough to pay rent for a one-bedroom in nearly all of northern New Jersey, it's still higher than similar jobs in this sector. So again, highlighting the fact that great, we can kind of get paid slightly more, but it's still not enough to be able to live comfortably within the city. I noticed there's a question, but Adam, you haven't popped up. I guess you're still reading that question. We can come back to it in a moment. Although actually it's probably relevant now in reading just some of it.
Yep. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. I was
Yeah, I was about to switch, so I think this is probably worth
all
answering
right.
now.
You're on a roll, and I don't want to interrupt your flow. So the question here, I don't know if you can see it, but and I don't know if folks can as well, so I'll read it out loud. Is there a breakdown of the report with more context, such as what seems like a good salary doesn't go far in New Jersey, housing prices and rent are really high, and affordability depends on a dual income household. So being single in this field is extremely strenuous financially. Also, starting low pay follows through your career. Quite a number of the insights we've seen. That is. So I guess the question is the question here is the breakdown of the report with. Is there a breakdown of the report with more context?
Well, I mean, you'll be pleased to know that it's almost, I think, a 250 slide report that kind of has
I've seen it.
every possible way of breaking this down, including questions which were on about household support, how you maintained your career in the arts as well. Definitely those people who had more financial support from multiple jobs or from partners who were in their household that had higher salaries that allowed people to work within the arts comes through. So it will cover all of that and more, I'm sure.
And that will be, and I know that we're going to touch on this a little bit later on when information will be posted and where it'll be posted, but that slide deck in its entirety, the full report, I should say, in its entirety, will be available on the ArtsPay NJ website coming up.
I believe that was the intention as it
Yeah.
was done last year, so that will be coming soon.
Yep. All right, back to you.
Uh, Great. All right. Well, we're almost at the kind of the end of our stories. So this is our last one in terms of something to pull out of the data this time. Um, and I think it was just to kind of take a moment to look at the workers and have some kind of very high level stats around those that we didn't include in the 2023 study, and certainly not as kind of fully as we have this time. So they were part of it, but they didn't have dedicated sections. So this is on teaching artists and freelancers, and a little bit more detail on internships that we'll start with as well, because they were kind of new bits of information. Um, So on internships, quite a lot of stuff to look at on this chart. So starting on the left-hand side, you can see a little pie chart there, kind of showing you how many people have participated in an internship in some form. So 50% have not. So half of the workforce said that they hadn't participated in an internship. Of those that did, so obviously the other 50% have at some point, 21% have participated in it as an unpaid only, and 19% have done paid and unpaid. Only a very small minority have only ever done paid internships, which again speaks to the challenge of even kind of getting a foot in the door in the sector if the most of the time the internships are not paid for. Um, the kind of the middle kind of chart that you're looking at here is the kind of the reasons for not doing an internship. So some of the challenges that were kind of preventing people from even getting onto the ladder in the first place. The biggest one being just simply couldn't afford it. A third of people who didn't do an internship just weren't able to pay it. 33% needed paid income. So obviously there's a kind of correlation there. And some people were saying that there wasn't anything available. I think the other thing to put out there, kind of on the right hand side, is the 21 hours per week, kind of being offered as an internship without pay, which is quite kind of unsustainable. And only a certain number of people with certain financial means would be able to then do that. Adam,
Just
is
going to
that
jump in here. There was another
yeah?
question here, and I don't know that we asked this in the survey, but I think this is one of those things that might fall into learning that we could possibly, growth that we can possibly have in the industry. But someone was asking, again, picking up on the comment on affordability. Daniela was asking if we asked about arts employers who are equipped to offer their employees information on the existence of affordable rentals in the area and eligibility. She notes that as I agree, that would be very helpful. But I don't know if that's something that we asked about as a benefit.
But we didn't, but that does sound like it would be very helpful. So that's definitely one to follow up on.
Yes, absolutely. All right, back to you, sir.
Great. All right, we are getting close to the end of this. So, teaching artists, I say they had a whole new dedicated section this time. So it was the first time they were asking questions directly relevant to teaching artists. We had 110 that responded, so within the survey. So a decent chunk of the survey fell into that kind of category. Um, and effectively, what they are describing through all of their kind of responses and the kind of free text responses is that they're a workforce doing the kind of full professional work but without any of the protections in place that full-time employees are getting. Um, so 14% describe it as their kind of full-time primary profession, which suggests that actually for most people it is not because it is not sustainable in itself as a full-time primary profession. The rest obviously use it in addition to other things. So 40% use it as supplemental income, so topping it up, and 38% combine it with other roles. But then you kind of look at the challenges that they're facing. So over half look at kind of inconsistent work schedules. So even if work is booked, it sometimes then disappears. 50% are citing kind of pay rates as a primary concern, and we can have a look at that specifically on the dashboard in a moment. 46% kind of obviously they don't get any of the benefits that full-time employees are getting. And there's so much unpaid work. So again, it comes back to that kind of like hidden labor cost of being able to then actually work as a teaching artist requires you to do lots of unpaid preparation. It's a sort of similar story with the freelancers as well. So freelancers, we had 48 respond to this, and we asked them some more specific questions as well. But because of the nature of kind of project-based work, there's a lot more uncertainty in what's involved and what therefore is kind of required to be able to maintain a kind of freelance existence. So travel kind of and unpaid travel being kind of one of the primary barriers. Like if you've expected to be somewhere and most of that is cost, there's a loss before you even started work. And if you're not then being reimbursed after it, so two-thirds no reimbursement. Uh, Two-thirds as well, 65% are preparing without pay. So the preparation challenge is here, but it's also higher than it was that we saw for teaching artists. lots of kind of waiting time between sessions as well. So I think that relates to if you're contracted to do a morning session and an afternoon session, but you're only contracted for the hours that work in the morning and the hours that work in the afternoon, and you just can't do anything meaningfully in the gap in between, that's effectively lost time. So it's a cost. It comes at cost because that could be more productive or you could be earning during that time. So there's the kind of loss of income there. There's lacks of contract, that 63% have no written contract, or only sometimes do. When work dries up, only 41% are eligible for unemployment benefits. So there's a greater precarity there in terms of maintaining that employment. Um, and actually, there is some pushback amongst the kind of freelancers that actually 62% have said that low pay is the reason that they've declined work. So I guess it's that actually, if offering freelancers low pay in the first place is kind of creating the situation. One of the solutions is to work out what is a fair rate of pay. And again, we can use the dashboard and the findings to work out actually how does that look and how does that kind of compare across different rates. And then just to kind of color it again, to add some more color to the kind of ending of this, as a freelancer, every waking hour feels devoted to some work that needs to be done for the work days to happen, which I think absolutely speaks to the fact that there's so much kind of hidden labor and preparation that goes into being able to deliver the work that is being delivered without the compensation in place. The one final kind of bit of the survey to pull out, because again, we did a little bit more of a kind of painted a bit more of a picture of this time round, was on volunteers. Um, and effectively what we found is that actually there's a lot of goodwill and volunteering that runs in the sector. Did you want to jump in on that question, Adam, before I finish off this one?
Yeah, before you jump into volunteers, there was a question just on related to union staff, but there were if there were any other reflections on satisfaction and any other factors for those organizations that hire union staff. I don't know if that's something that was in the survey findings.
Well, we do know who were members of the union, and what we don't know, or at least I don't know off the top of my head, and we could definitely go and have a look at it to answer it afterwards, is what the correlation is between those that are members of union and their kind of satisfaction ratings or their perceptions. Um, so I'm sure that the data exists to be able to answer that question. Unfortunately, I can't answer it right now.
No, that's okay. All right, I think that's it for right now. There's one other question in the chat, but again, it's logistical. I'll answer it there.
Great. All right, so just to kind of then round this up on the data side of things from the individual survey. So yes, as I was saying, we did a section on volunteers, and what we found was that 33% of all respondents are across the board, across worker types, different career levels, employment status, like the third consistently across all of those. There wasn't much variation. It was basically like take any kind of subsector or subset of the sector, and you'll find about a third of people who are volunteering in some respect. Of those people that are volunteering, about half are doing board service or governance work. But actually, I guess what's more interesting is that half of them are doing kind of event support, so just volunteering to work at events. And increasingly, I think that I can't necessarily say this for sure because we didn't have a capture it before, but certainly in the UK, we're seeing an increase in this, which is the percentage of people who are kind of volunteering as mentors for other people as additional kind of points of support to be able to kind of add some structure to the way that people then can kind of try and navigate the sector and the various challenges. And I guess it's it was ever thus. This is kind of the sector is built largely on people who dedicate their time and their passion and their kind of goodwill to be able to make it work. And I guess that the survey is really being able to capture that, and a lot of that really comes through quite strongly in the responses that we've seen. So just to kind of summarize then, before we kind of take a little pause and look at the dashboard, the organizational dashboard, just to reflect on kind of what we've seen and the highlights that we've pulled out of the individual survey, what we've learned. So we've seen that pay has gone up, but actually most people aren't necessarily feeling like it's gone up, or if they are, they're not necessarily getting the compensation in line with the increase to costs. Compensation as a bundle, I mean, it's fairly complicated because there are so many different elements to it. It's not always clearly understood or communicated. So again, there's a kind of challenge which is, potentially easily solvable in terms of compensation benefits. That kind of overwork is normalized, that the sector is definitely kind of asking more than it acknowledges formally. And that has been kind of effectively um, taken as the expectation. Transparency, definitely those people who mention transparency saw it as a really positive, but it comes across as quite exceptional. The fact that, oh, okay, pay is transparent, compensation is transparent, which obviously tells you something about just how uncommon it is. Uh, Improvements that we've seen definitely aren't reaching everyone. So we saw again the kind of growing gaps with some of those kind of pay in particular and perceptions of benefits that has increased. So there's a potentially greater kind of inequity. And now we're able to kind of capture a bunch of workers with specific questions around kind of teaching artists and freelancers that we hadn't been able to do previously. So we've been able to kind of build the picture and add more kind of understanding to that. So yes, that's kind of really just to summarize the individual survey. We're going to jump into the dashboard now, but I can see that there's a question that has popped up in the chat, which might be worth pausing on before we jump into the dashboard.
I'm gonna actually hold this one, David, because it's a general question. Because we have that little Q&A. We have a couple questions I'm holding for the Q&A section there at the end.
Perfect. Okay. In that case, I'm going to jump in and give you a very, very quick overview because I know that we want to ask some more questions in the Q&A and there'll potentially be some more that arise as I do this. So I just need to switch my screen over to jump into the dashboard, which involves me stopping and sharing on here. And then I'll have to narrate because otherwise you'll just be left in silence. So I'll have to narrate exactly what I'm doing. There's my share button. And I'm going to share the dashboard. Great. So hopefully you can see the dashboard. Adam has confirmed. Good. I have successfully switched over. Seamless transition. So this is the dashboard, which again, like last time, will be made available to you to be able to use free of charge to kind of explore at your leisure. But just to orientate you with this one, because for those of you who are familiar with the 23 version, there have been some kind of adjustments to the navigation in particular on this one, hopefully to just improve the way that it can be used. So this is the landing page of the dashboard. There are then various kind of buttons that you can click on that drill down into various different parts of the dashboard. So you've got the ability to have a quick look at an exec summary. You can look at some of the organizational stats. So this is based on the organizations that responded to the survey on behalf of the organization. So it includes some top level questions about budgets, which are also in here, the type of organization that you are and how some things have been changing. And then the heart of it is really the compensation stats, which are those 6,000 plus different personnel where people filled in kind of for each organization, the details of their salary and type into spreadsheets that we basically then consolidated to create the interactive tool that we're showing at the moment. So yeah, if you click on, say, something like the executive summary, this is where it takes a moment to load. There we go, not too bad. It'll tell you kind of very top level some of the things that we've already talked about. So how many organizations responded, how many had job data, how many personnel that covers. So you'll notice that there is a difference here because the data set is different from the individual survey in terms of some of the median salaries that you look at. That's just because this one has a much broader kind of personnel set. So it's actually a lot of the kind of changes are in the same direction anyway. So I think they complement each other, even if they're not a like for like comparison. So just be mindful of that. And then jump back into the home now and head into the compensation one because I think this is the kind of the most useful, the one that I think most people used in the last one was the ability to kind of jump into the compensation and start to look and see actually what's a fair salary for different kind of types of worker. So again, navigation is through kind of drop down menus on here. So you can look at terms of employment to switch it from kind of full-time, part-time, project-based. So project-based is largely going to affect kind of freelancers. So at the moment we're looking at 21 organizations who had some project-based employees. That's about 600 personnel. We can see that the hourly rate, because I'm on compensation of hourly rather than annual and per project, was $48. The interquartile range is basically like the middle 50%. So the kind of the mid bracket, which is the useful way of thinking about like what's a roughly kind of like salary expectation that I should be thinking of. This is the kind of the middle 50%. So if you're below that, then you're in the lower 25%, and you obviously don't want to be down there. And if you're above that, then you're in a slightly higher kind of percentage quartile. Then you can see how it might break down depending on what you've got filtered by work area. So we've got 4 categories here. We've got artistic, we've got education, we've got other. Obviously, the catch-all for everything doesn't fit into those in administrative. And then we've also got a further breakdown of kind of granularity here with job categories so that you can see how it compares. And it doesn't work so well with this one. We can fix that actually because it looks like it doesn't show you the actual, because of the way it's truncated, the median hourly compensation, but you can see it on the scale here. So when you get to be consultant, in the administrative consultant, your median compensation package jumps up to 125 on average, versus curators at the other end, which if you hover over it, you get a little pop-up, are on $30 an hour for project-based work. So you can see how much of kind of a range there is. But if I switch to full-time and I switch to annual, and then you can kind of see, so we've got a slightly different number here in the median, different kind of range within the interquartile range, and 929 personnel fit into here. Erica, you've just popped up to ask me some questions.
I have popped up. I just wondered if
How
this
you
is
might use
a
this.
good time to do our sort
Yes,
of
perfect.
scenarios. So we know that one of the ways that people use this dashboard is to sort of think about their own experience as an employer or as an employee or as a freelancer. And so we thought we would just give kind of a couple of scenarios or use cases, and David can show how somebody might navigate to find the answer they're looking for. And then hopefully these are representative of ways that you can play around with it once the link is published, which should happen within the week on the ArtsPay website. Is this a good time to do that, David?
Let's do that. Yeah.
Okay. So the first one is if you sort of imagine that you're the executive director of a smaller mid-size arts organization, and you're moving into a lot more education programming, and you've decided you're going to hire an education director for the first time. But before you write the job description or post the job publicly, you want to make sure that you're thinking realistically about the salary range to make sure that it's actually reasonable for your organization and that you're publicizing the right salary range. So how would you use the dashboard to find that answer?
Great. So hopefully I will remember everything you've just asked. But the first thing to do when you said kind of like small, medium size, what I filtered on is budget. It's probably the best like proxy for how big an organization is. So I'm clicking on the budget kind of drop down here. It brings up a list of options here. So I'm going on under $1 million and $1 million to $5 million. So basically everything 5 million and under. And then you ask for, and I have to just pop up. So then once you've selected it, you hit apply, and then it'll show you what you're filtered on down here. So already I'm kind of shifting things in the dashboard. So as soon as you click on anything, it will update automatically. So even now, having clicked on those organizations with smaller budgets, I can see my median salary has dropped 54. And you asked for, so job category is probably the most common of like granular that we can look at in terms of specific job titles. So director of education, if I start typing in director, I get a few examples here. So I got general director, general administrative, general artistic, director education, which is what I want to click on. So then I hit apply, and now I'm getting my results on. Okay, so I've got kind of the results of 13 personnel from 12 different organizations that fall into this under 5 million for a director education, a median salary of $65,000 and an interquartile range between 60 and 71, which gives you some indication of then that's the ballpark that you should be aiming for in setting the salary for that kind of role at this particular kind of moment.
Perfect. And as you can see, if someone was in this, they could potentially filter in other ways, like by geography, et cetera, or discipline of the arts. But we don't need to get all the way into that here today. Okay, so then from the other perspective, let's imagine that you're a job seeker and you are interviewing for artistic director jobs, and you're just wondering what you can realistically expect. And maybe you're interviewing at some mid-sized organizations and some larger organizations, and you just want to know what the difference might be in the offers that you receive.
So I think probably the way to start is just to kind of start with the job that you're kind of looking for. So which would be on job category. So if we're going for artistic director, if I start in artistic here, I can see all of the artistic roles that we've got covered here. So there's a director. So I will click apply on that. So now I'm looking at kind of the median of 100K and 30 personnel. But like you say, if you don't know if it's going to be a big organization or a smaller organization or a mid-sized, you might want to then have a look at budget and go, okay, so actually if it's for one of the bigger organizations, what's the difference between those that are at kind of the 10 kind of mil level? So now I'm looking to get kind of 127 as the median. The interquartile range. Oh, it's disappeared off the edge. It's so large. I have to fix some of these things. Minor bugs, but hey, it's good to find them when we're doing this live. And say actually kind of going, okay, so that's the 10 million range. What about if I'm going for a more middle size and the 5 to 10 million? What does that look like? So okay, maybe we're kind of down to 100K. So you can start to see the difference in terms of what you might ask based on the size of the organization.
Great. And then the last scenario that we wanted to bring in, actually, it's great because Christina has mentioned in the chat about being a freelance artist. I will say that in terms of your question about small business, all of this is about being employed by nonprofit arts organizations. So the scenario we're going to use is for a teaching artist, a freelance teaching artist. So let's imagine that you are a teaching artist. You've been offered a role running an arts residency, and you've been offered $25 an hour to do the work, and your gut says like, well, I don't know, that seems really lower than what I've been offered elsewhere. How could you use this to kind of check against the median?
Great. So, whilst you were speaking, Erica, I just switched the terms of employment to project-based, which will be more likely suited to teaching artists and to hourly compensation. So hopefully that then kind of, well, it covers 600 personnel, so we know we've got like a decent subset to kind of to look at for this. And then I'd go again to job category because we know that teaching artist exists in here. So there actually is two. You can have teaching artist education. I'm going to click on teaching artist just to get that at the moment. So this is for artistic teaching artists. So the median here is $75, but it's actually only 33 personnel. If I also add in my education, which is probably more likely, there we go. Now I'm up to 64 personnel, and my median is still $75 an hour, but I've got an interquartile range between 60 and 80. So if you're being offered $25, Erica, I would be saying no, because that's going to put you way down in the bottom 25% of the range. You need to, more than double that.
Yeah, although it's so interesting to think about some of the data about prep time, right? If I was being offered $25 an hour, but they were anticipating 2 hours of prep time for every hour taught, and I was getting $25. So all of that is worth considering as you look at the numbers. I do see the question about hourly wages for part-time executive directors. So that's exactly why we make this dashboard available and free to everyone, because those are the kinds of things that you can play around with and look at your own specific circumstances versus us trying to like capture every single one in this one. But it looks like David might be able to pull
I
that
was
up
just
for
going to
you
see
right
if we
now.
could do it. It's low, actually. I don't know if that's what you're expecting, but part-time hourly for a director, but that falls into administrative, and they're only sounding their data. So it may be that it's a small sample.
Yeah, great. I think that was it for me. So I'll go off camera and turn it back to you.
You
Great
answered
work.
my question. Y'all continue.
Adams arrived. Has Adam frozen or have I frozen?
I think Adam has frozen.
Okay. There's always the panic, isn't there? Someone's going to freeze when we're doing this live. I think that we are going to jump back into general Q&A, given we've only got 13 minutes left of this webinar. I think there were some things to pick up. So I'm going to stop sharing and just
So
start with.
my internet is a little unstable all of a sudden, of course.
Well, maybe
Yeah.
what we could just do here just for next steps. So just to let you all know that the recording of today's session, the slide deck, the full report, access to the dashboard, those will all be available by Thursday. So look out for some email, and you'll have access to all of that on the ArtsPay site. Also, if you have specific questions as you're playing with as you're reading through the report, as you go through the dashboard, please don't hesitate to reach out to Erica and I, or reach out to one of your arts service organizations that you're a member of. We're all here to help you. So please don't hesitate to do that. We're also going to have webinars available, as we've done in the past, where we're going to take some of the key themes. And I do want to thank David so much for really doing such a great job in the story that this data shared, and the comparative, really seeing how we've moved from 2 years ago to today, but still lots of work to be done. So we're going to take some of the high level findings and turn those into some learning opportunities through some webinars. So be on the outlook for that. We'll try to do one or two of those before the end of June, and then pick up again with a couple of additional learning opportunities in the fall. So be on the outlook for that schedule. But please, you will get all of this by Thursday, so be on the outlook for your email. And again, if you do have any questions as you go through the data, do not hesitate to reach out to us, as well as your art service organization that you are mostly aligned with. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I was having internet issues, of course, right when you needed me to queue up some questions. All right, you ready, David? There were a few questions here that I wanted to make sure we touched on.
Yeah, happy to
So
answer
one
any
of those,
questions.
which John just touched on, someone had asked about sort of individualized assistance, and we really encourage you to reach out to, as John said, John, Erica, myself, anyone, any of the art service organizations that are listed. If we ourselves don't have the answer, we can connect with someone on our team who does, or otherwise. And let me just scroll back here. So there was a question earlier about, did this round of the survey also identify that there are more women than men doing the work in New Jersey? And is there another example of men and women feeling differently about a data point that might be, telling, that might provide insight?
So on the first question there, is there a higher percent? So I think that there is a slightly higher percentage of women that responded to the survey. So there is some, but we have to be mindful here in terms of actually how representative that is, because we only have a sample of 500 and so respondents. So we can draw comparisons as to how representative it is. I think we just need to have a little bit of caution when interpreting the data on that. There are other areas, but I don't, again, have them to top of mind as to what the differences are. But it does warrant some more kind of investigation, I think, just to pull out some of those things. The pay and the perception and the representation across different levels were absolutely the key things. I'll see if there's anything else that stands out when I kind of go and have a little look again.
So the next question here is there any data regarding employment from county or town, basically government entities here in New Jersey? Sometimes county or towns or cities have their own departments that are arts and cultural, and just wondering if this round of the survey captured any data from government entities.
So we did have some university affiliated organizations that were included in the kind of the scope of the survey. There weren't a huge number of them, so we have to be mindful again, we don't have a comparator because they weren't in the baseline from 23. So we can look at them in isolation, but there's not very much that we can kind of use to drill down into at this point. So I think it's probably like market for a future study to do more of a exploration of that.
I would agree. I mean, the capacity, the focus of the study is specifically for nonprofit art, arts organizations. We're doing our best, as these the iterations come out to try to expand that. But we also have to be realistic about what's feasible within the scope of the study. There was another question here regarding normalization. And wondering if there was any study of supply and demand in the field, number of people looking for jobs versus the number of jobs available, and some other thoughts here about how low pay can often be implied as for someone that might be grateful, quote unquote, for the job. But just did we was there was an inclusion study about in terms of supply and demand of the jobs?
No, not directly. I mean, the only way I can speak to this is like by reflecting on what we found in the UK, which probably is not totally dissimilar to what you have in New Jersey. So that we know through the work that we do with Arts Professional, which runs the Arts UK, ArtsPay UK study, that the number of jobs that are being advertised has kind of reduced in the last few years. So therefore, the kind of the from a supply side, you're seeing a squeeze. So of course, you're getting exactly what the question was kind of hinting at was that more people are going for fewer jobs. So of course, that in that market, it's all actually in the benefit of the employer because they have a greater choice of people who are looking for work, which does therefore drive down the incentive to offer kind of decent pay and benefits. It shouldn't be like that, but that's just market
I
economics.
totally agree. One more question here that I see in case any pop in, and we have just a couple minutes left here. And again, this has to do with showcasing the dashboard versus playing with it yourself are two totally different experiences, and we definitely encourage folks to when the dashboard is posted to jump in. Someone was saying that it kind of looked like all of the admins, all of the people that work in the administrative part of the organization, from assistants to executive directors, are kind of smushed together. Is that right? And knowing that's not, but maybe you could explain a little bit about how that's parsed out and how we dealt with sort of job titles.
Yeah, so we did do some consolidation of job titles. What we're going to have another look at before this gets released is if we can add another layer of granularity to this, just to split out some of this so that you can get exactly what it is that you're looking for. So, really good to hear that that's what you're after because I think we can absolutely go and kind of do a little bit more kind of tailoring of the dashboard to answer that.
Yes, absolutely. And being able to look in different job categories is critical to the use of the dashboard, not only for the organizations, obviously, but for empowering the workers themselves as well. So I think I'm looking here. I think that's all of our questions at the moment. Um, but unless someone pops one in, I think you've fielded all the inquiries.
And 5 minutes to spare as well. What are we going to do with our extra time?
I think we are we passing it back to oh wait, someone raised a hand. Uh, I'm wondering if hold on one second. Only because this is a webinar, so it's kind of
You
a
can't
little
see
interesting
anyone. Yeah.
when wait, I think this was Whitney. I think that was you who asked the question. If you want, you can put it in the chat, or if you like, I can. It doesn't look like I'm gonna allow you to talk. I don't want your question to go missed. I'm gonna hit the allow to talk in case you want to unmute yourself and ask the question.
I said in the chat that I didn't mean to. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. We just don't want to miss we don't want to skip anybody.
Adam, can I just let people
Absolutely.
know, just because, it can be hard to wait a couple of days to get into the dashboard and play around or to look through those 250 slides if you're into that like I am. But if in the meantime, you're just desperate for more ArtsPay content, if you go to artspaynj.org, it'll pop you back over to the page on the Theater Alliance site. And there are archives of all of the educational webinars that we did last year before the new deployment of the survey. So if, as you're listening to this data, you're thinking, oh, I need to learn more about employee classification or how I can offer retirement benefits, things like that. We had some great experts sharing their wisdom about that. And those are all recorded and archived on there. So you can kind of get a jump start on what you can do with the data.
Thank you, Erica. And thank you, David. Thank you, John, Diane, the Arts Council, and all the folks who have continued to support this in important work. As promised, we are going to post the recording of this video live. We're going to do a follow-up email in the next few days to share both the slide deck and the recording. And as we've said a few times here, we're going to put everything on artspaynj.org. I want to just again thank the entire team for working on this. We've been working on this project for well over a year now, the steering committee. So glad to be able to share these results publicly and to see the influence and impact that they'll have in the coming months and years. If anyone has any additional questions, concerns, comments, feedback, please reach out to us. Our intention is to do this survey again in the future, and we want to continue to grow it and improve it. Take care, everyone. Have a great day.